Hello, my name is Ashley and this is Faithful Rattos, and welcome or welcome back. So in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about mammary tumours in rats, and this is something that has been on my mind recently because one of my rats has a mammary tumour, and I'll go into detail more about her specific case at the end of the video and use it as sort of like a case study of what you might decide to do if one of your rats has a mammary tumour. But I thought I could make a informational video as well and sort of compile everything that I know and everything that I've read about mammary tumours and give you some further resources as well. So mammary tumours are tumours, obviously, and they're of the mammary tissue, and therefore they are more common in female rats, but male rats do have mammary tissue and so they can get mammary tumours. It's just much less likely for them to get it. So the first step, I guess, is talking about the two different types. Most mammary tumours in rats are benign, which means not cancerous. They're just fatty lumps or extra growths, and these are called fibroadenomas, and they're encapsulated and they're relatively easy to remove. And because they're not cancerous, they're not malignant, they're not going to really spread, although they can grow again, and that's what most mammary tumours in rats are. They can also be adenocarcinomas, which, as the name might suggest, these are cancerous, and these ones can spread throughout the body and throughout the system because of their malignancy. But most tumours in rats are not cancerous, so I guess you need to sort of act with the assumption that most of them will be the benign type when you're choosing treatment and things like that. So generally the best way to diagnose a mammary tumour is through a fine needle aspiration. This is where a vet goes in with a really small needle, pulls out some of the insides of that lump to determine whether it is an abscess or a cyst. If so, you might get pus and blood and things like that. But if it comes out and it's just blood or fat or things like that, then it is going to be a tumour, and that's probably the most certain way of diagnosing a mammary tumour. However, given the position of where it is on the rat and how it feels and generally the other context around it, how fast it came up, blah blah blah, it's quite easy for a knowledgeable vet to deduct whether a lump is an abscess or a mammary tumour. And so that sort of goes on to the next section that I want to talk about, is the likelihood. So these tumours are obviously much more common in does, in female rats, just because of what they are. Male rats do have mammary tissue, however they don't also have most of the hormones that go along with it that will sort of create these tumours. So there's generally two hormones that cause these tumours in female rats, and the first one is prolactin, and the second one is obviously estrogen. And prolactin is what makes milk get produced. I don't know what I'm doing here. And estrogen is part of the estrous cycle, as part of, sort of reproduction and all that sort of stuff. So these two hormones are much less prevalent in male rats, and so are the tumours. Age often increases the likelihood of getting the tumour, so as a doe increases, then she is more likely to get the tumours. She's also more likely to get tumours based on her diet. There was actually a very interesting sort of anecdotal finding that some breeders here in the UK found about 10 years ago now, where they found that using a specific brand of nuggets, either as their main staple diet or as part of the diet, there was an increased occurrence of tumours, and they put it down to meat meal and animal protein from not good sources, which really does make sense. Diet also has something to do with it, and also if the rat is carrying extra weight, if the rat is overweight, that also increases the likelihood that these tumours will form, because a lot of them are sort of like fatty tissue, and so keeping their weight down, keeping them slim and lean does help as well. So those are the sort of increased likelihood things for these mammary tumours, but it is quite a common thing for rats to get, sadly, especially the does, and I think if you've kept does for any length of time, you're likely to have come across this. Now, this is very different from what people say. They say that rats are prone to cancer, and there's a lot of different types of cancers that rats can get, whether that's pituitary tumours or ZGTs, zymal glands tumours, or other different types of cancers. Mammary tumours generally, as I mentioned, aren't cancerous, and so I wouldn't really consider them cancer, although they are tumours because they're growths that are not supposed to be there. So now we're getting on to the treatment. How do you treat these things? So the first choice option for most of these situations is obviously to remove it. Most tumours aren't painful in and of themselves, but as they grow, they can become a hindrance to how they move. Then they can run the risk of rubbing on things and getting sore that way and getting sort of contact sores. And then there's also a risk, the further on they go, the bigger they get, of ulceration. So this is where the tumour bursts. And then also necrosis, which is dead tissue and infection and things like that. So really you need to treat it before it gets to that stage. And really you need to treat it before it gets big. And obviously big is dependent on the size of the rat, but you know what I mean. So in most cases, tumour, you want to remove it, and that is the best sort of treatment, and in most cases that will solve the problem. However, there is chance and likelihood that these tumours do recur, and that's something to keep in mind. Often as well, whilst a doe is getting a tumour removed, if she's stable under the anaesthetic, a vet will decide to also spay at the same time, because removing the uterus and all those other organs and the hormones therefore decreases the likelihood of tumours growing back. And so often if a doe is going in for a lumpectomy, as they call it, she'll also get spayed as well, just to sort of mitigate this happening again in the future. Now, not all rats are going to be great candidates for surgery, whether that's because of age and just age-related health issues. Tumours are much more common in older and elderly rats, so some elderly rats won't be able to cope with that sort of surgery, whether it's the recovery or the anaesthetic. Then you've also got rats who, for other reasons, have other health concerns. Maybe they have chronic respiratory issues, or they have a heart issue, or any other number of things. That means you might not want to operate on them. And also it's up to personal preference, and maybe the tumour isn't growing very fast and it's been there for months unchanged, and so you don't feel the urgency to operate, and that is also okay too. But in those cases, I need to stress that once the tumour starts to impact movement and agility and things like that, then it's time to consider having that rat euthanized, because we don't want to let it get to the point where it ulcerates and then therefore becomes necrotic, because that is extremely painful and can happen very, very quickly. So generally, the advice is to operate when it's small, and if you are going to leave it, that you monitor the rat closely, and that when it does start to impact them, that you have them humanely put to sleep so that it doesn't impact them. And it's a really difficult decision to make, because in a lot of instances they're not otherwise unwell, they're perfectly fit and healthy and doing rat things and eating and all this stuff. And so that is a really tough decision to make, and I think that's something that you should consider when you're considering to operate or not. Are you going to be able to make that decision when it's right for the rat, and put your needs second in that situation? So it's really important for you to sort of plan ahead and know that if a rat is going to be put to sleep because of a tumour, then in a lot of situations they're going to be otherwise fine, and you're going to have to be able to make peace with that, and that's something to consider when you're considering whether or not to operate. Now, that's not to say that all rats who have a tumour, that's why they get put to sleep. They could also, and especially if they're older, develop other health issues like hindline degeneration or heart failure, or any number of things that would mean a put to sleep is on the table as well. So those are sort of the treatment options as it comes to sort of the standards. However, there is something interesting that may also be useful and helpful when it comes to mammary tumours in rats, and that is the drug camberliger. Now I'm going to put it on the screen because I cannot for the life of me say it without, and I didn't write it down, I don't know why. In the UK we call it Galostop, but it does have different names. You might have heard of Galostop as a drug used to reabsorb pregnancies, for unwanted pregnancies. However, because it's hormone based, it can No. It can slow down the growth of tumours, especially those prolactin-based tumours, as that's the sort of hormone that it works with. And in a lot of cases, it does slow down the growth and gives you a lot longer with the rat in the case where they're not a surgery candidate, or in the case where you remove it and you treat with this drug to sort of prevent the growth of any more. It's not fully proven, though, at the moment, that this drug will help in all cases, and I think it's really dependent on what type of tumour and what hormone exactly is causing it. So according to my vet, the prolactin-based tumours are more likely to respond to this treatment, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it. I think the drug is kind of expensive. For a 15 milliliter bottle, I paid about £50, and that lasts for about a month with a 500 gram rat. But yeah, that's another thing to consider, that you can also go down the route of treating like that, and the drug can be used as alongside a surgery as well. Yeah, that's another option. As I mentioned, recurrence is pretty likely. I wouldn't say in all cases, but in a lot of cases, recurrence is likely, and that's something to consider. If your rat is a candidate for spay as well during lumpectomy, that is often a good idea to reduce the recurrence. Obviously, if the rat is struggling under anaesthesia and the lump is off, then the vet is going to make the decision to wake them up and stop the surgery. But having them spayed at the same time can sort of decrease the likelihood of them returning, and I mentioned the drug that can decrease the likelihood of them returning, and it can also slow down the growth. These are all possibilities, they're not certainties, so really discuss the situation with your vet. One other thing before I go to sort of talking about my rat Temple is I guess this is a debated topic when it comes to mammary tumours, and that is getting it biopsied and sent off in a lab. A lot of rat savvy vets and breeders and owners who have kept for a long time, who are experienced, they will say it's probably not necessary to get the sample sent off and sort of get a specific diagnosis of what type of tumour it is, because it's quite expensive and it doesn't necessarily change the treatment options. So for a lot of people, this isn't something that is ever considered. Now, I do know of many people who do get the tumour biopsied and sent to the lab and diagnosed specifically. However, I don't think it's something that I would personally do in almost all circumstances, because, as I said, it doesn't change the treatment option. You're spending money on something that I don't think changes how you treat. So I feel like there's better ways you can use that money. Instead of spending those hundreds of pounds on the biopsy, you could use that money to buy the drug for a couple of months and slow down the growth. So I think in most cases it's not necessary. I'm not saying that you shouldn't or that you can't. You definitely can, but I don't think that it changes the treatment options, and so generally I wouldn't recommend it, and most people don't. And finally, I want to talk about my rat Temple and what I've decided to do in her situation and why. So Temple came to us about a month and a half ago at 19 months old as a returnee to her breeder, and I took her in. She's actually one of the sisters of the boys that I already have, so it's really special. In the sort of notes about her, I was told that she was spayed back in December for aggression to her cage mates, and that sort of calmed her down. And then about a month after that, a tumour appeared, I think in her armpit area, and that was removed in February. So I got her in March, and when I took a good look at her those first couple of days, I noticed that in her groin area there was a tumour growing. And so a little bit of a panic inside of me. I was like, wow, what is going on here? And I spoke to my vet, and she came over and looked at her and confirmed that it is a mammary tumour that she's got in her groin. Now, the groin area is a little bit harder to surgically remove just because of the things that are going on down there, and the vagina and the urethra and the anus and all that sort of stuff. It's a much more difficult procedure. It also tends to impact more quickly than one that's in the armpit or any other place, because it can then inhibit peeing and pooping and all that sort of stuff. So it's one to keep an eye on. Now, considering that she was spayed first, due to aggression, not because of tumours or anything like that, she was spayed first, and then she got the tumour about a month after she was spayed, and then only a month, maybe 3.5 weeks after having a tumour removed, then she got another tumour. To me, it didn't, and her age, given that she's 19 months, and the fact that she's just moved house, and to me, it didn't seem fair to have it removed again. Now, that is my own personal decision. She's already been through 2 surgeries, and the lumpectomy was a little bit difficult for her to heal from. She had a bit of scar tissue, and it didn't go fully smoothly. It wasn't anything major, but it wasn't the easiest of recoveries, and because of all those factors, it didn't seem fair to put her through another surgery when, in her circumstance, the likelihood of it reoccurring is quite high given how fast it's reoccurred already. My vet said that she's more than happy to do the surgery and that that's okay, we could go ahead with that. But for me, the recovery aspect of surgery, given how many times she's already gone through it and the fact that it's not certain that it won't grow back. So I decided not to have the surgery for the 3rd time or the 2nd time for the lump. And it's quite a hard decision to come to, because for me, like, I don't want her to have a tumour, and seeing the tumour every day is quite sad. But it is small at the moment. I'll put a picture on the screen of the location and where it is. She is a little bit overweight at the moment, and I think it's likely because of the spay. So she is on a bit of a diet to hopefully lose a bit of weight, and because of all these factors, I just didn't consider surgery the best option for her at this time. But we are treating her with Galostop. The drug is called Cambergoline. This is what her medicine looks like. So she gets this. This is what the drug looks like. She gets this once a day. She actually needs some more. Like, I don't know if there's that much. This is my little pharmacy for all my rats on drugs. She gets that once a day, and I don't think the tumour has grown at all. So it's been about a month and a half since I noticed it, and about a month since she's been on the drug. And I think the first couple of weeks I noticed a slight increase, and I think it was very noticeable because I was away for a week. So when I came back, it was much bigger than I had remembered. But since she's been on the drug, I don't think it's changed at all, which is really, really nice. And I hope it stays that way for her. It's not impacting her. It's not hurting her. She really doesn't like me looking at it and touching it, but it doesn't seem to be causing her any problems. So I'm just going to leave it and see what happens. She is about 20 months old now, 21 months this month. So hopefully we've got many more months with her, and this drug does help to prolong that. But there's no way of really knowing if the tumour itself is just slow growing or if the drug is helping. But we're going to stay on the drug, and we're going to see what happens. And that's Temple, and she's a really special rat, and so I really hope that we get a lot longer with her and her little tumour. So yeah, that is my video about mammary tumours. I hope it was helpful. If it was, let me know if there's any other sort of like common health issues that you'd like me to talk about, because I'm more than happy to do that. I'm planning also to make a video about another type of lump, which are preputial abscesses in males. One of my books has what I think is a preputial abscess, and they're also quite a common type of abscess. So I'm going to make a video on that and talk about his experience with it as well. Yeah, so thanks very much for watching. Do stick around and subscribe and all that stuff. Yeah, see you later. Bye.